Gale Boomerang from Twilight Princess, although being one of the most mysterious Zelda items, is an item that not many Zelda theorists have touched upon. The boomerang contains a supernatural entity that calls herself the Fairy of Winds, making it one of Zelda's few sentient items. But how and why is there a fairy inside of this boomerang? Who could this fairy be? After being stumped by these questions for years, I finally have a theory that I'd say is rock solid. One that's crystal clear, and it has to do with, well, the crystal inside the boomerang. You got the Gale Boomerang. This mysterious boomerang houses the Fairy of Winds. As Link is told, this item contains a fairy, a powerful spirit that possesses magical abilities. This fairy also talks directly to Link and says, "I am the Fairy of Winds who resides in this boomerang. You have freed me from evil, and I now have my true power back. Please, take it with you, use it to aid your quest, and may both my power and blessing go with you." This is clearly not your average boomerang, housing a fairy and all. I tried to think of any other items in the Zelda series that house supernatural entities, and one other item did come to mind: the Goddess Sword from Skyward Sword. The Goddess Sword, which later becomes the Master Sword, contains Fi, our companion who feels the constant need to perform interpretive dance and complain about our health being low. It's been theorized for years that the crystal on the hilt of the Goddess Sword is what actually houses Fi. And this would make sense considering Zelda's long history of crystals being used to house things. So we have examples of two items that house spirits, and both have a crystal on them. So I would like to propose that the crystal at the center of the Gale Boomerang is what houses the Fairy of Winds. But what is this crystal? After doing some thinking on this, I came to a conclusion that some may find odd at first, but just hear me out. I believe that the crystal that houses the Fairy of Winds is an item that we've seen before. An item used by the hero of time, Fforouri's Wind. There are a number of things that led me to this conclusion and add credence to this theory. Firstly, the two crystals share the same shape and color, both being what appear to be greenish octahedrons. Secondly, they share wind properties, both creating gusts of wind when activated. Thirdly, the Gale Boomerang is described as an enchanted boomerang containing the Fairy of Winds. Notice the word enchanted, which means to put something under a spell, or to influence something by charms. Fforouri's Wind could be this charm, this magic spell, this crystal at the center of the boomerang. Fourthly, the Gale Boomerang acts how one would expect a boomerang enchanted by Fforouri's Wind to act. Think about it. What did the spell of Fforouri's Wind do in Ocarina of Time? Well, it saved locations for you and let you go back to those locations. What does the Gale Boomerang do? It saves locations and goes back to those locations. So instead of Fforouri's Wind enchanting Link himself, it has simply been applied to a boomerang and enchants the boomerang to return to saved locations. I believe that Fforouri's Wind is what allows the boomerang to save and return to the locations it locks onto, while the Fairy of Winds provides the wind necessary to actually get it there. After all, it was shown that the Fairy of Winds can move the boomerang all on her own. Some people have theorized that the Gale Boomerang had previously been used by a hero other than Link, as the Fairy of Winds dialogue does come off a little haphazard. Well, since you freed me from evil, you know what? Yeah, just take the boomerang with you, I don't mind. However, this is not the way I see it. The Gale Boomerang serves a very specific purpose in the Forest Temple. It's used almost exclusively to turn the fan spinners in the proper order to unlock the boss key. Without the Gale Boomerang, getting to this boss key would be impossible. This shows clear forethought. Someone had to have known that the ancient hero chosen by the gods would come to the temple and need the powers of the Fairy of Winds to to defeat the evil that lay within. It's safe to say that no, there was no previous hero or owner of the Gale Boomerang, but it was there for Link and Link alone. Now, did the Fairy of Winds herself realize this? Or was she sent there by a higher power that knew better? I believe the latter to be the case. In the mini-dungeon known as the Cave of Ordeals, we meet the Great Fairy. She tells Link, "Welcome, hero, to the Cave of Ordeals. I am the Great Fairy. I reign over all fairies of this realm as their queen." Yes, the Great Fairy recognizes Link as the hero of legend. And as queen over all fairies in Hyrule, the Great Fairy alone controls where they all go and when. Her dominion is further demonstrated when she says, "In praise of your efforts thus far, I will release fairies to Ordon Spring." She later releases fairies to Ffaron, Eldin, and Lanayru Spring. She truly is the queen of fairies, ruling them all. Does this sound familiar? There was a great fairy in Ocarina of Time who lived at the top of Death Mountain. Link is told by Kaepora Gaebora, "The great fairy lives on this mountaintop, and she will give you a new skill. She is the leader of the fairies, you know." Could this be the exact same great fairy? Furthermore, could the Fairy of Winds be a fairy that we've seen before as well? So let's indulge this theory for a moment. The Great Fairy from Ocarina of Time is the same Great Fairy from Twilight Princess. This actually isn't even a crazy theory, to be honest, as the two games are very close to each other in the timeline. Who then, from Ocarina of Time, could the Fairy of Winds be in that case? Another connection could be made to Farore's Wind. I would like to propose that the Great Fairy of Magic, who bestows the spell of Farore's Wind upon Link, is the Fairy of Winds. How is this possible? Well, remember that the Great Fairy in Ocarina of Time is who gives Link his magic meter. She has the ability to literally give people magical abilities at will. It's possible that she gave the Great Fairy of Magic her wind magic in order for her to protect the Gale Boomerang from falling into the wrong hands. Now, Ook, the mini-boss who we get the Gale Boomerang from, was only able to wield the boomerang due to the dark powers imbued from a shadow insect sent by Zant. Without Zant's dark magic over the boomerang, the Great Fairy of Magic, who would now be the Fairy of Winds, could easily just fly the boomerang away from trouble. Yes, sealed within her own magic spell, Farore's Wind, encrusted into the middle of the Gale Boomerang, is where the Fairy of Winds was kept. Her days as the Great Fairy of Magic were now over, and she was now entrusted with aiding the hero of legends further in his quest to vanquish the Twilight. And this is the Gale Boomerang Theory. Appreciate everybody watching, and make sure to let me know what you think of this theory. Is it a little out there? Possibly a little far-fetched? Maybe. But hey, as long as I can spark a discussion and have a little fun while doing it, why not? Quite honestly, this was one of the hardest theories to research I've done yet. There is so little information about the Gale Boomerang, it's actually staggering. So forgive me if I flew by the seat of my pants a little bit in this one. Let me know what your theory is about the Fairy of Winds and the Gale Boomerang in general. Again, I thank you for watching, and make sure to subscribe for more of my Hylians.